Okay. Now, this second case is an informal appeal. It's actually one of my clients, and we didn't win on this one. But a little bit of background on it was the work related to something called search engine optimization. So most people would know what that is. And the client had claimed successfully for its SEO work for probably 5 or 6 years. It had successful claims. And as a result of the SR&D credits, had actually built up a fairly large team of, I don't know, probably 9 or 10 full-time people that were doing this and developing different methods. And so really, I don't think the CRA challenged the science of it, or that the work was done, or that there were even technological uncertainties. This was a very interesting case, in my opinion, because they identified different methods to optimize PageRank designs. They had several years of informal claims. They limited their claim under the informal appeal methods. And what they were saying is their key objectives were to recognize which kind of different data structures provided different results. I had a more detailed one that talked about if I type bottle of Coke or Coke bottle into Google and show images, I'll get vastly different images just on something that you think would be synonymous. So again, by things that a lot of people think are synonymous, there may be different word links or different kinds of things that would cause things to move up and down in ways that even Google doesn't understand. They're trying to model it. They have ideas, but it's not a fully complete science. Okay? So they were not looking at Google exclusively. They were looking at Yahoo and some other engines as well, but that was their primary goal. And they got something called a Google search appliance, which is something that you can license from Google, which will allow you to kind of understand more how their queries work by running them directly through this appliance. And what they did is they developed, I don't know, series, probably 100 different websites that were just prototype websites to see what if we try to do the same thing 8 different ways? What if the layout's different? What if the text is different? What effects will that have? So they identified over 200 different variables that they started to model if we do these things. And Google was actually supporting them and working with them. It wasn't that they were trying to hack Google or work around Google or anything. It was something that everyone was interested in at this point in time. Now, one of the key problems, or the only key problem here, from an assessment standpoint, is not so much the technological advancement, as we said, that they acquired the Google, or the activities themselves, that they acquired the Google search appliance. They did various testing that was very systematic and had hypotheses and conclusions. They tried to cover other search engines as well, using those prototype sites, but not with the search appliance, and made some various conclusions. The big problem, and the CRI argument that was effective, and I understand this, is ultimately what they said was, Google has a secret algorithm, everyone knows that, and they don't tell you. Even if they rent you their search appliance, they're not going to tell you how they do their searches or what their secret formula is. And they can and they do change their formula often. So anything you learn is nothing. It's not science. It's not computer science. It's how one vendor, Google, does something, and they will change it. It's just a matter of when. So you've learned nothing. And that's a very effective argument. Ultimately, I said, well, as far as appealing, yeah, how do we argue that if something's closed source or proprietary? Under the old rules, where we had all these software examples, they said, well, if something was closed and proprietary, and you had to do this type of work to work around a closed source problem because they wouldn't let you know it, that was generally an indicator of eligibility. So now, I'd say after about 3 years ago this started happening, that all SEO claims got denied. And the one problem that I have with it is not so much that that argument doesn't make sense. Logically, I guess you could make that argument. It's a shift in policy of the way things were done. But it wasn't done via stakeholder process. It wasn't done with, hey, you know what? We have a new belief that SEO, because of these reasons, shouldn't be eligible. It was done by having a client or series of clients, because I've had numerous clients come and ask about this, who may have had 5 or 8 years of successful claims, 100% successful claims. And as a result, invested more money and manpower and really tried to build a business like that, we're told about these changes by getting an assessment saying, the work you did last year is not eligible. Oh, and you're already through this year, so it's probably not eligible either. It was a very unfair way to deal with this if that was in fact the policy of the CRA. I'm not sure if that's the policy of the CRA or if that's in fact just the policy of a district office or where that mandate came from, and we'll call into question where are all these policies coming from, because there's different policies that are popping up that when you ask nationally, they're not really sure what you're talking about. And a month later, they'll say, oh, well, that's a local initiative that people have initiated. So again, this causes concern. So we'll talk about some of those. This is a prime example of really what's to be learned from the case on specific facts of this case. But ultimately, the CRA rationale may be well, but the method that they're using to deploy this into the industry is creating a lot of backlash and feedback. It's hurting the companies, it's hurting the claimants, it's hurting the practitioners that do it, and it's really just poorly planned in my professional opinion. So ultimately, I mean, this case actually is an interesting read. I like to go over it because it was an informal appeal. Things were somewhat relaxed. We went in. The judgment didn't come out till later, but on reading it, I got even more confused. So I'm saying I'm not really sure what happened here. The judge said, let's take a look at two things, the technological uncertainty and the advancement. So saying how do on and off page variables interrelate to create a structure. He said, I would not consider this the nature of applied research, citing something that cannot be removed by engineering or standard practice. They're saying submitting different versions of websites to determine significant variables relies on existing technology in a routine manner. Routine describes techniques and procedures and data generally available to competent professionals in the field. This is how I interpret what the company did. So this is worrisome when I see, this is the first time I've seen a comment like that at the judicial level. I've seen lots of comments like that at the Canada Revenue Agency level, and we can talk about we'll talk about instances of that before. But they're basically saying that, almost the argument, to paraphrase it, is if you spend enough time analyzing and experimenting with something, you will be able to come up with a solution. So anything is solvable. I'm saying that's really not the right structure. What we will look at is if there's an existing model to do something, yes or no, due diligence or standard practice, and if the client has identified variables or things that existing models or existing solutions don't optimize or don't allow them to meet the objectives, and they're experimenting, understanding the interrelation of those. And the courts have said throughout the last couple decades, that's really what they're going to look for. Right? Again, I'm not sure if I'm seeing the law being applied the way I would think. Ultimately, I can live with the judgment saying that, yes, if you say, well, Google can change things, and interoperability, which was the term that was developed in the software case studies that the CRA had used up till about 2012. And that was a series of cases, 6 specific projects that developed with CATA, the Canadian Advanced Technology Association in Ottawa, about 120 participants, including myself, mostly from industry, so people, IBM and Hummingbird and all the big software companies. And they agreed that these were indicative issues and indicative representations of advancement in technology, but all those examples have been erased. And really now we're trying to piece court cases together or fragments to build a whole new series of examples in the absence of these. Okay? So the judge said that, quote, advancement equals determination of algorithms that relate variables for ranking sites. He said that it was no doubt complicated. There was hundreds or thousands of variables, but we're solving an equation someone had already resolved rather than a new proof. So again, I've read this over and I don't understand what he means by that. Then he gives a mousetrap example or analogy, which confused me even more. He said, we're not creating a better mousetrap, we're just figuring out where mouse get caught, location, nature, enticement, etc. So again, I'm not sure what to infer from that, or if I can take the general analogy to move it up to another level, but it does provide a little bit of humor for me. I can start to make good jokes or jabs about it, right? Because again, I think if you were building a better mousetrap and you can show variables on all these things to create something better, we might still be back in the bounds of eligibility. Okay.
I had a question for you.
Yes. Question? I'm good? Okay, sorry.
It might be as much as an observance than it is so much a question at this stage. But what I'm seeing a lot of is that in the observance of what I see in a lot of times when you're defending a claim, I set apart trying to prove initially, of course, uncertainty and why. Yeah, why uncertainty is not a good thing. But what I'm seeing is they seem to be taking a cause that they look and say, not only is there no advancement, they want to also see that the work involved in overcoming uncertainty, there's advancement in that work, meaning it has to be advanced work. Like they don't want to see you using existing technologies. But who wouldn't be using existing technologies to try and figure out methods to overcome problems? Yeah.
So if I reiterate or paraphrase that, they're saying that use standard engineering principles to solve a new problem, they're saying you can't use standard engineering principles or do things the way. Yeah. Okay. That's again. Let's address that because I think what you said is actually illustrated in one or more cases that we're going to talk about. Okay. So real quick, just to recap on emotion, the repeatability exercise was really, or issue was really what they focused on, saying that because Google won't tell you what they do, anything you learn about this is not science anymore, it's nothing. It's business knowledge that's fleeting at best. So again, the whole concept of interoperability and working with closed source components and things that create legitimate problems for computer scientists, that whole area of research seems to be shifted. Okay, sorry, there was one question before we go ahead. Yes, Harvey. Sorry, I'll come over.
Two quick questions and one comment. You did this by informal procedure. Was there an agreed statement of facts?
I believe there was.
Second of all, I have dealt with this judge in a lost case on a company called Amorex, and I found that his judgment was totally surprising and brought into bear things that were never ever mentioned by either us or the government. Did that happen here?
That's a good question. So in this case, the judge didn't give a ruling at the end of the case. We got it mailed to us 3 weeks later, and yeah, it was very surprising because it seemed like we presented good arguments of advancement, systematic investigation, but ultimately, as I say, reading through a lot of the rhetoric, I mean, the case is published, people can read it, it's posted, it's interesting, but I didn't really learn anything other than SEO is dead because Google can change its mind. So that's a very large shift in policy, and it was brought about through the audit and assessment process or review process, not through the stakeholder processes, as you would hope in a more communicative system.